Welcome back. This is Sabrina Monarch of monarchastrology.com, bringing you the astrology forecast for September 15 to 21st, 2021. The mood of this week is growing ever more cosmic, mystical, and oceanic, with a full moon in Pisces building. The Piscean inheritance, so the deeper promise of Pisces, is one of pure bliss, the delight of the mystic, the total approval of life. As beautiful as that sounds, the mystic has many changing emotions and is prone to feeling the entire range of human experience: grief, rage, sorrow, and ecstasy alike. Pisces connects us to our porousness with all that is. Pisces includes the wisdom of overcoming unnecessary suffering, or knowing how to create necessary psychic boundaries in the midst of the ocean of every possible experience or feeling. And yet the full range of true experience, that which is ours to process and feel, is an ego-dissolving and universe-opening medicine. So Pisces is, deep in the feelings, can get quite overwhelmed with the largeness, the oceanicness of everything. But as we give space and feel the beauty and feel the ceremony in that, it can become ecstatic or pleasurable to be that sensitive. And while the moon is growing in fullness, Venus in Scorpio will square Saturn in Aquarius. The square in general is a stressful aspect, signifying tension and dynamism. The quality of this square between Venus and Saturn may correlate with conflicts related to intimacy and relationship, self-esteem, so our intimacy with ourselves, values and value judgments. And the way that these conflicts come up in our field may feel historic, like we're really in it. These are patterns that we've just been working through for our whole lives, perhaps. In the psychological visions of Stanislav Grof, he talks about systems of condensed experience, coex systems. So it's like there's chords in our consciousness, like a whole musical chord, where every time that we feel safe and protected, it echoes back to our entire memory stream of every time we felt safe and protected, times we were cradled as a baby, versus when we felt alone and cold out in the world. And we think about the time that, someone forgot about us, or, a deeper sense of isolation over an extended period of time. Like we have these whole chords. And so when you are feeling, say, rejected by another person, you're not just feeling that moment of rejection, you can be feeling that whole chord reverberating within you of what that rejection is really hitting on and all the memories that that's stirring up. Another way that we talk about that is trauma. But seeing it, whether it's debilitating, or it's more just like I'm in the soup right now of my feelings, or I can see how this one, pointed, sticky experience is reminding me of, thousands of other times I've felt this way. And when we can see it as part of that chord, we can see that there's a story that we've been living. And of course, the immensity or the ancientness or the largeness of those stories can feel overwhelming at times, or it feels like, oh, I've always been this way, could it change? But that's some of the deeper stuff that we're working with at a karmic level in this lifetime, or those patterns that are coming to a head, and where we are exhausting those patterns and changing the story and making adjustments and changing our karma, so to say. So just the capacity, recognizing our patterns is a form of self-awareness and psychological maturity that is deeply valuable on a personal development or spiritual path. This is an accomplishment in of itself, to recognize a pattern. And the story of how these patterns transform is the drama we are living out, right? So think about any kind of hero's journey tale in that sense of the inheritance. My life has always been this certain way, but I aspire to have this other result. And what it means to kind of go against the grain of the inertia of that story that's already in motion to have a different experience. So someone, for example, who maybe grew up in a tumultuous home, didn't have a lot of positive examples of relationship, went through some abusive relationships, but really deeply in their heart wants like a fulfilling relationship. There's that, swamp, there's that inertia of that, and then the promise of something else, or say scarcity, someone who's always had money struggles, grew up in a family with money struggles, but wants to move past that ceiling of that like upper limit of how much abundance they can have. And so what does it mean to overcome or kind of transmute or transform that collected dense history of scarcity patterns? Part of, recognizing patterns is seeing that it's a paradigm, it's a story, and it is something that we've lived inside of, we've maybe built an identity inside of, we have habits that relate to that. And so as we become aware of that, we also can start to build a bridge to a different way of being or dream of something else, should we like to change those particular patterns. But also understanding, in this work of being aware of the deeper kind of just like fixed science, like we're in it kind of things. There's a humility in that too, that it doesn't just, these ancient patterns don't really change overnight. Like we're in this kind of unlayering, unraveling process. And we have our lifetimes to work with some of those deeper kind of core patterns that, we're in. So this week feels like it has some kind of breakthrough energy around those patterns, whether it's like, here we are again, and we're being confronted with that pattern, or there's a sense of it changing. So the full moon, on the other hand, in Pisces, we have the sun in Virgo, moon in Pisces. It's mutable in quality though, which relates to change. And the moon in Pisces will also be conjunct Neptune at this full moon. And this signifies dissolution, dissolving. We may be increasingly lucid this week about the ways our particular patterns, such as in intimacy or how we relate to work or money, how these patterns show up in every area of our lives and not just the place that it is the loudest. In this heightened state of lucidity and awareness, and in this heightened state of the psychic tension, perhaps, of holding this heightened awareness, we may be inspired to make a new choice or enact a subtle adjustment that allows something major to release and loosen. So I will get into our week's transits in more detail after a few announcements. I'm going to share my screen for that. One is that you can get on my mailing list. And this is a great way to stay in touch, find out when my astrology reading bookings open, get in the know about my courses, and receive these weekly forecasts to your inbox every week in written form with the link to the YouTube as well. You may be listening to this forecast on Magic of the Spheres podcast, and you can, check out the show notes or the YouTube notes for the link to the mailing list. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Sabrina Monarch. I love to hang out there, go on stories, post things that I don't share here necessarily. So go find me there. The Evolutionary Astrology Intensive that I'm teaching is coming up. This will be the 9th run of the course. It's several months long, and we go deep into the planetary archetypes, the signs, aspects and aspects theory, and Pluto and the lunar nodes, and learn how to read the natal chart from the perspective of the soul as this being who reincarnates and inhabits multiple lives to play out certain lessons, right? So when I was talking earlier about those deep patterns that we're in, that's not just this lifetime, we can come in here with some stuff from prior lifetimes and we're working through it again. So I found that this wisdom school. This kind of astrology is a really penetrating lens into some of our deepest life material, seeing it in a much larger multi-lifetime context. And then finding out how to work with that in the now, in this lifetime. How to be with this content in a way that's actually applicable. Evolutionary astrology as a type of astrology has helped me find so much like mental and emotional and spiritual wellness. It's helped me kind of find some insight about some of my deeper challenges, and then a creative outlet for working with those challenges in different ways. And people who come through this program feel like this kind of world opening or universe opening quality, because we're getting into, the mystery teachings or the deeper aspects of all the signs. We're also traveling to the outer planets, which represent things that are kind of beyond the known, like the transpersonal realm that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto relate to. So the content is provocative and stirring and really stimulating, right? And then the way that it helps us contemplate ourselves and tell our own story, and explore our development, is just invaluable. So you can learn more about this course and read student testimonials on the course page, which is linked. If you're thinking about it, don't wait till the last minute to sign up. When you sign up, I'll send you the syllabus with the reading list, and you can get started on some of the things. And if you are, considering the course and you want to check in, like if you have any questions about it around like how it may relate to your process personally, feel free to reach out to me, Sabrina@monarchastrology.com, and talk to me. Part of this course is that, there's pre-recorded content, but we meet every week, and I'm available to talk with students. I learned astrology when I first started, transitioning from being a self-taught hobbyist kind of astrologer to like studying formally. I was able to talk to my teacher one-on-one, and that really meant a lot to me. So in that kind of spirit of where I come from in my lineage of studying astrology, I like to converse with you. I like to be available in that way, and also create a community where you have friends and like fellow travelers in the realm of astrology to build connections with, and speak this language with. So learn more about it, read student testimonials on the course page, and you can enroll there as well. So let's get into our week. Oh, and one other thing. I am doing a Inner Wealth Psyche as Treasure meditation on September 17th at 5 p.m. Pacific. The link to sign up for that is also in the notes. I love visualization, and I've been practicing it intuitively for as long as I can remember, like as a kid, falling asleep at night, visualizing things. And the deeper I got into studying the outer planets and studying, manifestation and karma and these kind of spiritual principles, I realized that visualization is a really important tool, not just in emotional wellness and manifesting and all of that, but it's kind of like a gardening for the psyche. Like you're building beautiful things and palaces in your inner eye, and that actually changes your life, as within, so without. So visualization as a practice is something that I wanted to share by creating some more guided experiences. And the theme for this one is about inner wealth. So the idea that there's this palace of like riches inside of us, that psyche is inherently valuable. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up. It will be live, but I will be recording it. So if you can't make it live, you can still sign up and receive the recording after. Okay, and here's our week in a moment. September 16th, 2021, the sun in 24 degrees of Virgo will trine Pluto retrograde in 24 degrees of Capricorn at 6:53 a.m. Pacific. So we have the sun and Pluto harmonizing. The trine is an easeful harmonic aspect in earth signs. And this could speak to the creative potency of mundane transformations, shifting things in the home, signing up for an event or making a time-based commitment, putting it on your calendar, it's real. Crafting something by hand, setting up a campsite or fire, gardening, working with a particularly special object or tool. So we're thinking kind of like earthy, but powerful. Not that earth isn't powerful innately, right? But we're feeling that potency of the physical realm. It's like our attention and creative potency is being drawn and collected downward into some kind of embodiment or form. Though these embodied or concrete acts may be mundane or even basic, dare I say, the quality of attention in the acts is felt in the final form. Consider the aura of a meal someone cooked for you or that you cooked with love. Craft turned into aura. The creative potency was transmitted. Neglect or avoidance also contains an aura. Like, I'm not sure actually how to pronounce this word because I think I've only seen it written. Miasma. I'm going to go with miasma. Miasma defined as an oppressive or unpleasant atmosphere which surrounds or emanates something. Some kind of grotesque vapor, right? It is possible for neglect to compound miasma. Something suddenly benign or innocuous, like it's just fine, it's just basic, becomes more terrible seeming the more it builds up the aura of neglect, right? So this actually even happens in terms of intimacy with ourselves, right? Like innately, we're joy, we're bliss. I think so, at least. But any kind of compounded neglect, like we haven't checked in with ourselves, we haven't taken the time to be with ourselves, then when we go within and we look at ourselves, it's like there's some cobwebs in there and it feels a little bit scary, or there's some deep feelings that are unprocessed in there. And it's not that our inner world is innately that scary. It's just that if we haven't looked at it for a long time, there can be that kind of pain of neglect. So similarly, this can happen with, just think about like a space in your house. If it's a space that collects, like a lot of water and gunk and mold and stuff like that, it's like if it was taken care of at a more frequent interval, it would just be fine. But you leave it alone for long enough and it starts to get stinky and starts to attract bugs, and it builds this kind of vaporous, grotesque quality that is part of the aura of neglect. So for our purposes with Sun-Pluto, and so we're thinking about the sun, as this radiant quality and Pluto as like this deep potency. And so it's like the power, or it's also the kind of putrid quality of neglect. So either like creative potency or putrid neglect is kind of the binary that I'm thinking of here. So for our purposes, it's like we're granted the opportunity to do energy work with this transit, either through confronting sites of neglect in our lives and tending to it, pouring our attention lovingly into a craft or task, or some combination of both, right? And a lot of things aren't so black and white or simple in terms of like, oh, this is a beautiful part of my life and this is a neglected part of my life. Like even just thinking about our whole full-bodied relationship with ourselves or with life, it's like there's the beautiful and the ugly. But if we've been preferential and like really chosen some places and really neglected other places, this could be something to think about in terms of just giving love or tending to places that need it. And then Venus in 7 degrees of Scorpio will square Saturn retrograde in 7 degrees of Aquarius at 11:15 p.m. Pacific. So this is the same day on September 16th. So shadow Scorpio, and responsibility, Saturn, are intricately connected. Shadow work allows us to reclaim personal power. So away from leaking it, spilling it out, projecting it, or being in like unnecessary victim consciousness. Or victim consciousness in general. And with truer access to our own power, we gain the capacity to wield that power and live from that place of power. So I'll leave this again actually in the notes. It's an article about the victim triangle. So victim consciousness is a triad of archetypes that includes the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. And this article is pretty deep. It's the kind of thing where you read it and you see yourself in it, because most humans play out the victim triangle at some point in their lives. And even if you're aware of it, it keeps coming up. It's a natural kind of psychological Bermuda Triangle that we can get stuck in. But the way out of the victim triangle, as proposed by this author, I believe it's Lynn Forrest, but I'll leave the link in the notes, is responsibility. That actually, through taking deep responsibility for ourselves, for our lives, like that's kind of the medicine. Because when we're in victim consciousness, we believe we're powerless. When we're in that kind of persecutory space, we want, to like give someone what they deserve because they're so bad and like we need to punish them. And when we're in rescuer, we are seeking to find a sense of personal importance from helping another person who maybe doesn't even want that help, right? So finding out kind of like when we're in that state of angst or powerlessness or feeling victimized, where is the site of responsibility and power that we can gain access with, and from there gain more agency and choice in this life. So taking the deepest level of responsibility for our lives at a soul level is to aspire toward or be in a state of excellence. We are not wasting our life in woe is me pettiness. We're expecting others or the world to change for us to feel okay. This is not to say it's wrong to feel the pain states of feeling victimized by ourselves or by life, just that we truly need tools for moving that energy if we do not wish to live stagnant and disempowered lives. And so there's many tools, right? There's modalities, there's psychology, there's energy work, there's acupuncture, there's existential kink, there's astrology. Like all of these tools, all of these modalities are designed to kind of help us be empowered, or like find a connection to our personal power and access it, and kind of overcome the stagnancies or blockages that come up in an untended psyche or in a conditioned psyche. Right? Like you can even move a lot of energy just by shaking your whole body and stomping or having a tantrum. Like, like there's a quality with Scorpio of like deep cathartic feelings that, can get stuck and held onto and create all kinds of distortions, or they can like really move and be kind of like a shamanic gateway into the next moment or the next evolution of ourselves. So Pluto has long been my favorite guide into shadow work. It's why I teach a Pluto-based astrology, and I just love this school of astrology so much. I love Pluto Volume 1 by Jeffrey Wolf Green. It has expanded my imagination of how Pluto complexes can play out across the houses and signs and archetypes. More recently, Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott has become a cherished fave, which by no coincidence, the book Existential Kink talks about the astrological Pluto in the first chapter. My heart was just, I'm just taken. Exploring the concept that we unconsciously or secretly are getting off to the things that we hate, how we love to hate them, segues into reclaiming our power to transform the situation at hand. So, complaining is a good example because sometimes energetically you can feel into yourself or the way that others are complaining, It's like there's this kind of like getting off to the high of like talking shit, you know? And if the addiction to complaining, the addiction to being in that problem and getting off from it is stronger than the will to transform the situation or connect to a deeper truth, that's a form of stagnancy, right? Or a form of mediocrity, to be quite honest. And so working with shadow work would be even getting to the place where you can acknowledge like, oh, I love this situation that I say that I hate. I can feel myself. I'm like, I have all this high sensation and charge, and I'm kind of getting off to talking about it. So can I expand that, go fully into it, see what the fuck I'm getting out of the situation, right? Why I'm hooked into it, why I'm drawn, why I'm compelled, what part of me is getting wrapped up, right? And then from that awareness, start to kind of loosen that and move that energy. But if we are not at the place to admit, you know, it's like, no, I hate that thing. I don't like that. I'm not into this. I'm not hooked into that. Then we don't have that responsibility needed to start that process of transformation. So Venus-Saturn. Venus-Saturn can relate to the facilitation of deep, trustworthy, like solid love, right? Love that takes time. It can also be the kind of closed heart or the sense of the gated heart, the guarded heart. So when we're working with Venus Saturn, it's like there can be a high bar, there's like high standards, and it's an interesting kind of balance or place to feel into if our particular standards are really just ways to avoid vulnerability, or it's the deepest, truest honoring of ourselves. So what is it like to have standards and an open heart at the same time? But Venus-Saturn appreciates intimacy, right? But it just demands it to be a higher quality. And with Venus and Scorpio, we're especially thinking like the depths of Venus, so intimacy. At a deeper level, Venus-Saturn is about the integrity we have with our values. And living our lives in integrity can challenge us to learn how not to be rigid or closed off, but how to actually, in a committed way, tend to the energies or activities that give us and others the most life. You know, so taking responsibility for your talent, for your power, for your life force by feeding it. And not in an addictive way, right? There's a difference between feeding in a compulsive, addictive way and like really nourishing. And that's even kind of like a pattern that we may cycle through, unravel, and kind of work out in ourselves. In the key of Scorpio and Aquarius, part of integrity with this transit is becoming increasingly lucid about our shadow. And from this lucidity, gain more access to choice, right? Perception, vision gives us more choice. It raises the bar of how we participate in relationship because we move away from enacting unconscious patterns as we unveil them cyclically. This work doesn't end, right? As long as we're human. And we come to our relations from a place of choice as opposed to compulsion, addiction, which is more extractive and not as vulnerable. So an example that I can share is like one of my, I think, hooks that astrology helped me see was like a need to be believed. Like I have some unusual ideas, I think, in a unique way. And if I'm not claiming and kind of like owning that, and I'm projecting that onto other people, then I'm so sensitive if people understand me or believe me. And that enacts a kind of like power dynamic around how I'm perceived, or do people get me, you know, versus what it's like to see and get myself. And then interact with my ideas from a place of offering them, not from a place of needing to be validated immediately by certain specific people, for example. Right? And this can also think about like, if you're using other people to validate you, like you just want to be liked. And so is that relating to others a little bit less true if you're feeling so dependent on their response to you? You know, not that we aren't affected, not that we aren't vulnerable, not that we don't want to be seen or to be cared for, to be loved or any of that. But if our need is a loud thing inside of us and it's having us relate to others from a more extractive rather than generative place, that would be something to account for and start to work with. Seeking greater integrity in our relationships need not be just about how the other person shows up. It has so much to do with how we are in touch with ourselves, how we know our desires and needs and cultivate our capacity to communicate them, and how we stay in touch with ourselves as opposed to abandoning ourselves in the name of connection. So we can bring our full selves into our relationships, right? So this may be also a deeper examination of what are boundaries in relationship, Venus, Saturn. Boundaries not as a way to create a wall, not as a way to punish other people, but an awareness of what it is we stand for, what we desire, where our range is in terms of what we don't accept, and what kinds of actions we will take to remove ourselves from a situation that isn't right for us. So it's not really about controlling the other person's behavior, but it's about an agreement, right? Of like, this is what I'm available for, this is what I'm not available for. And if the situation turns into what I'm not available for, this is how I will remove myself. And so, of course, within boundaries, there's a need for sovereignty of all the parties involved, right? If there's a sense of we're molding ourselves or someone else is molding themselves to meet, you know, the boundaries that we've set up, there's a loss of sovereignty and there's a sense of addiction that's coming in instead, where it's like, we've lost touch with ourselves. So in terms of thinking about this from a place of integrity, it's like really knowing what you stand for and living in alignment with that. And that's kind of where we have the most power. It's not really about telling other people what to do or managing how other people behave. There's kind of a leaning into letting other people be sovereign and feeling into the truth or the resonance of the connection and moving from that place of truth. But that requires a lot of like personal knowledge and personal embodiment, and being in touch with our own values and being able to be with those. And of course, that's a journey. Like getting there involves a lot of experimentation and experiences and learning, right? And so how powerful is it to take personal responsibility for all of these learnings, to see where it is, you know, if we're in relationships that didn't work out for us, of course, we can examine the behaviors in another person that we didn't like. But it's also about us, like how we were available for that, right? And so when it comes to taking responsibility for, you know, creating the most empowered kind of love and relatedness in our lives, it's feeling into our own boundaries around what we're available for and not, and what parts of us, you know, are still hooked into the shadow or the kind of drama dynamics or the toxic dynamics, right? That we don't actually like or want, but we still have this deeper availability for. And so like, that's the deep kind of shadow work, boundary work stuff that this Venus in Scorpio square Saturn in Aquarius transit could be kicking up. Another way this transit could show itself to us is through intense dislike or aversion of something in ourselves or others, in the context as well of Venus being in Scorpio and Mars being in Libra. So we have this mutual reception between Venus and Mars that I explored last week. So aversion has been coming up. But in terms of looking at this from a shadow work perspective, we're missing the point if we stay in a place of separation about it. Like that energy is that person, not me. If there's a charge or an intense emotional reaction, it is activating a part of us, right? It's triggering us. And that's something to be curious about, a doorway to shadow. Venus in Scorpio can relate to deepening intimacy. And with this square to Saturn in Aquarius, generally, we may have some breakthroughs around intimacy that are truly innovative for us. There might be a conflict or something crunchy feeling, right? Like it's not smooth, like there's some crunchy energy. But the way we lean in and work with it may prove revelatory, and may actually deepen and strengthen, the bond. Venus Saturn has that kind of, it can be like the severance, like the cutting of connection. And it can be like leaning into the obstacle together and the bond growing even stronger as a result. And so, of course, the tools, the kind of communication skills, anything that we invest in, to learn relationship at a deeper level than perhaps what we've inherited from our family of origin or the culture, because our culture has issues and that gets put into our families and like we live that out. So the kind of innovative work of changing the patterns and learning different or better skills for relationship and applying that is deep work that offers some breakthroughs. September 20th, we have Mercury in 23 degrees of Libra, trine Jupiter, retrograde in 23 degrees of Aquarius at 3:53 p.m. Pacific. And just around an hour later, the full moon will exact in 28 degrees of Pisces at 4:55 p.m. Pacific. So we have the traditional rulers of Virgo and Pisces. So Mercury for Virgo and Jupiter for Pisces, modern ruler being Neptune for Pisces. These traditional rulers of Virgo and Pisces, Sun in Virgo, Moon in Pisces, opposite full moon. Mercury and Jupiter are trine. They're in this beautiful harmonic aspect at this peak Pisces full moon moment. So one spiritual opportunity of this lunation is to have a deeper sense of the interconnected fabric between everything, how all the details are fractal visions of the whole. Like Mercury is our detail, perception, our capacity to translate things between realms and be clever and make connections. And Jupiter is this like big overarching picture, like there's a kind of coherence or like a philosophical vision or a worldview. And so when we have Mercury and Jupiter coming together, it can be a sense of really feeling the wholeness and the details, or feeling like the larger philosophical connection between things, which can be a very spiritual experience to see how, for example, part of why I love forecasting or doing chart readings is that the same kind of things come up. Like I'll be having conversations with 10 people over the span of a week, for example, who are talking about kind of similar things. And it's like the fabric of the cosmos is here. It's showing itself, and it's showing itself through all these kind of unique situations that have the same, coherent quality. And that just creates a sense of like spiritual bliss to feel that kind of connection between things. Right. And if we have a worldview, which you probably don't if you're here listening to an astrology forecast, but if there's a worldview that things are just chaotic and random and not inherently meaningful, then it can be shocking to the system to experience synchronicity, because it implies that there's a oneness, or that we live in an ensouled cosmos, or that everything's interconnected. So Virgo is analytical and Pisces is fantastical. The axis here speaks to the way that our faculty for analysis and forming conclusions is truly more nebulous or cosmic than we might imagine it to be, as though it were strictly logical. Our logic is in relationship with a greater perspective, whether or not we are cognizant of that. The same concrete details are analyzed differently by different individuals. Say one person with a scientific materialist worldview, and another person with an animist or shamanic worldview. It's like we can travel into different worlds without moving physical location when we entertain a different paradigm of thought, right? So this, as I'm going to get into this full moon in Pisces, we're going to get a little bit heady, but I'll try to kind of like backtrack and unfold things as we go along. But basically what I'm pointing to here is that logic, as like, dry or like, cut and dry, factual as it may seem, there's a way that it actually is part of the kind of like creative forces of nature. So I practice this a lot in terms of mindset work, right? Where it's like, if we have a deep change in our thoughts, not just the surface thoughts, but like a deeper psychic undercurrent, the things we believe and think about, we actually experience a change in our physical reality around us, right? Or what we choose to focus on grows. Like there's a kind of creative pulse in the universe that plays with our thought forms. And so there's something inherently mystical about thought and logic, even though normally there's this polarity between Virgo and Pisces. The polarities, speak to two sides of the same coin. So when it comes to the details, right, that Virgo speaks to, there's also a whole that holds them. And the mind, the mental faculty, has been elevated in many philosophical or mystical traditions. I think, therefore I am, Kant. At once, this can give too much importance to the mind and support the mind-body split. Or approve of, cede culturally this mental supremacy or human supremacy over nature. Like I can manipulate things with my mind. My mind is the ultimate. Consciousness exists in my mind. Everything around me is just material to manipulate, right? Like there's a very intense kind of lineage with that. In other contexts, the mystical understanding of mind opens up the opportunity to have a fluid or suggestible enough consciousness that we can change our mental precepts, anticipate different realities, change our beliefs, and experience changes in the 3D matrix of reality itself. So this can be a little bit less about manipulating things for our benefit egoically, and more about being in relationality, like seeing how if I change the ecosystem in my brain or change the ecosystem in my thought forms, how will reality reflect differently? Like there's a responsiveness and there's a kind of relationality that's set up there. We're allowing, our experiences, the things that we encounter in the world, to impress us and, work with us. And to have changes in mind based on our lived experiences, as opposed to forcing our experiences to fit into narrow confines and boxes we've already created and are attached to. So anyone who's too rigidly attached to their mind or thoughts, mental concepts, it's harder to play with these reality changing experiments with much ease from that place. Because then, you'd be playing out the same mental programs and attracting a reality that reinforces those beliefs. It takes openness and willingness to change to play the game. And we're looking at Virgo Pisces, which are mutable signs, which is all about, change and fluidity. So some miracles that this lunation may have to offer, because we're looking at grace, miracles like a Pisces phenomenon. Some miracles can be changes of mind. In the course of miracles, for example, a basic precept is that a miracle is the change of consciousness from fear to love. Like that is what constitutes a miracle. There's a change of mind involved in that. That could also happen in the body, right? Like when we do a deep kind of like restorative somatic work or connecting to our soma, where we develop kind of like trust and love internally in places that we were in fear in our bodies. But some miracles with this lunation, having these changes of mind, realizing that some of our most bitter or disenchanted thoughts have been illusions and that they've been perpetuated and given life by any evidence we have collected to match these precepts. Such as the way we carry ourselves in a room when we believe no one likes me, right? And then the room matches that belief, because being in that belief creates feelings, and those feelings create actions. And like we're kind of in the web or in the paradigm of that kind of lack of confidence or fear of not being liked. And that comes out in our form and kind of tells that story, right? So to have the change of mind and then to enact and participate with the world from that different mindset, it does actually create a different reality. And it shows us kind of how fluid and flexible and playful reality can actually be. There are always deeper layers of knots that can be unraveled in the mind. And what better lunation than a full moon in Pisces conjunct Neptune to offer these healing waters of dissolving and dissolution. So where your mind is knotted in worry, separation, anxiety, etc., consider the greater story, the narrative that these thoughts are attached to. And are you willing to loosen that, to let it go? A Pisces full moon is a beautiful time for healing and softening the mind, or giving life to more supportive and beautiful thought forms that reflect a deeper awareness of love and benevolence in the universe. One of my favorite prayers when I'm caught up in the height of anxiety, right? Like anxiety is a lot of tension in the body that can be like an active moment for change, really. So I'm caught up in the height of an anxiety. I can see my pattern. I see the story that I'm telling. One thing I like to do in this space is to ask God if there's another way, to literally open the mind and personal ego to divine intervention, to see something previously unseen, to make contact with a new channel of awareness. So here, our Virgo mind potentially, without the integration of Pisces, is like trying to like logically figure things out based on what we can see, like what's already here, what's already present, tactile. Virgo's an earth sign. And when we're in that, we're trying to configure everything and figure everything out with the mind, to just like open that channel up to, well, what unseen information, what divine guidance is there for me in this situation? And there's a certain levity and I think openness that can offer, where it's like, we're not trying so hard to have the answer or the mental concept. We're just saying, what if I don't know? Like, what if there's something else to the story? And then we're making space in our vessel. There's like a cup of knowledge ready to receive those kind of magical perceptions that can re-enchant us or bring us back to a sense of love and peace, transforming fear to love. So that is my take on the transits, a transmission on the transits for this week. I forgot to mention at the beginning, but it's always super helpful if you like this video, if you leave a comment, let me know what you're thinking. I love to hear from you and what's landing for you. So please tell me kind of what's going on and what landed for you. Subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell to receive more or receive updates when videos come out. If you're listening on Magic of the Spheres podcast, do subscribe to this podcast. And I'll see you soon. I love you all so much. Have a beautiful full moon.